And we're live. Hi, everybody. Hi. Just give a couple seconds. Hello, everybody. Hello. Hi, and welcome to Geek Speaks Geek. I am your geek, George O'Connor, clearly speaking English. The Greek is in reference to Greek mythology. Every episode of Geek Speaks Greek, we talk about a different character from Greek mythology, be they goddess, god, hero, or monster. Today, this is one of those ones I'm going to have to ask you to help me quantify this. Today we're doing Io. She's definitely not a monster, though she's been turned into a cow. Is she a goddess? Hard to say. Is she a hero? Perhaps. I don't know. We're going to get into that. But before we get into that too far, I figure because I have a lot of stuff to show off today, I would start off by showing some of your artwork. If this is your first time watching Geek Speaks Greek, and I have a suspicion it's not. We seem to have got a real core group of people watching here. I have the best fans in the world. I'll just say it like that. And you're all very artistic, and everybody sends me these pictures, and it's all over the place. It's not just like, drawing. Sometimes there's like Lego, there's been Play-Doh, there's a lot of people who do cosplay. I think today it's all artwork. First one up is from Jake. This one's a little bit hard to see, so I'm going to hold it up close. It's also, you'll notice it's backwards. He drew the Tunisian fox. I mean, that's quite a fox. That's like, oh, I didn't know the Tunisian fox was a giant timber wolf. Makes sense. The Tunisian fox was a fox that was famous for being unable to be caught. He was literally, like, I wouldn't say cursed, gifted by the gods, that he was uncatchable. And it was this kind of, like, thing that you would make people do to prove themselves. Like, go catch the Tunisian fox, and nobody could. But this one hero, whose name is escaping me, although I think it's different people. I think Bellerophon in one instance. I think it's different heroes. There was a dog whose name was Leleps. And Leleps was gifted by the gods that he would catch whatever he was set after, no matter what. And whoever this hero was, like I said, pretty sure it was Bellerophon, maybe it wasn't, sends Leleps after the Tunisian fox. And it becomes like the mythological equivalent of like a logic problem. They're like, this is, it's an unstoppable force meeting an uncatchable object, so to speak. Like, how does this reconcile? And Zeus himself's like, yeah, this isn't going to work. So he actually takes them and he throws them into the stars because they kind of cancel each other out. There was just never, how was that going to work? It was going to break the universe because it just broke logic. And if you've ever heard of Canis Major and Canis Lupus, which are two stars, that's what they are. They're from that. So, pretty cool. I'm glad that's kind of a weirder one. I feel like, did I mention that the other day? I feel like I was mentioning that during Bellerophon, but maybe I actually cut that out. Maybe I was going to mention it and just never got to it. I don't know, but thank you so much, Jake, for sending that in. Up front I said how, it's probably like nobody new watching this. I know there's somebody new watching this because I actually just got an email from her father. Her name is Emily Rose, and this is a picture of her with a bunch of my books. And you'll notice that Emily is drawing some pictures. Look at this beautiful picture. It's Persephone in the fields of Elysium. And there's this little caption back there, which I really love. It just says, there's Hades, shrouded in shadow. Like, as he watches on, I'm like, yeah. They're coming to us all the way from, probably mispronounced as Derbyshire, England. So, hi. You guys probably aren't watching it live. You're probably catching me later on the YouTube. But, hey, thanks for writing in. Beautiful work. I like the image you chose to depict. It's really kind of a beautiful one. Like I enjoyed that sequence in my own books because the weird off-putting colors, like it's this land of beauty, but like it's still underground. So I chose some weird colors and you really nailed the color choices. So thank you so much, Emily. Up next, so we talked about most recently on, what is today, Friday? On Wednesday, we talked about Gigantes and the different varieties of Gigantes. And we talked about Otis and Ephialtes. And I briefly mentioned the story which got cut from Ares. And I'm kind of glad this came up because I'm going to be talking about cut stories today. Where I was going to show the abduction or the capture of Ares by Otis and Ephialtes. And since I never did it, Megan went and drew her own version. So up top, we have Otis and Ephialtes. You could tell because they're being big, bald bros, and they're all like, touch each other. It's like, oh, we're the best buddies. We'll never kill each other. You totally kill each other. And they're like, they're saying, they basically in this thing, I'm going to cut through because it's a comic. They're basically saying, yeah, we kidnapped you, Ares, because no one likes you and no one will miss you. Which is like, oh, I always feel bad for Ares. I just can't help being the way he is. And so Ares is all chained up. Now, it's a different version. Like, normally like this is like Aries, you're being especially dumb here. You can change shape, you know. You could just turn into a fly and go away. Normally he's like trapped in something, but here he's just bound and he's all sad and he's kind of thinking upon himself. I know, somebody else wrote, Little Sierra wrote, poor Aries. I do feel bad. And he's just feeling bad, like, why do they all hate me? It's like, it's really sad. And this is, Megan's really good at kind of like exploring like the thoughts of people like this. And then we see like, also a thing that Megan is really good at is drawing like all the Olympians together. I can say, having done it many times, it's really hard to do it. She does it like every comic, it seems. So there they all are, and like Aphrodite, who is the only one really missing him, is like, has anyone seen Aries? And they're all kind of like, who cares? And so she's pleading with Hermes and Athena, who is, you know, Megan is shipping together. And they finally go find him. And now this is also very interesting. Look at poor Aries when she finds him. He's grown a beard. I don't know, I've never thought of that before. Like, yeah, I think because I know that the gods change shape, I assume that their hair doesn't really grow that way. Like I have a beard anyway, but if I were clean shaven and you locked me in like a room for like a year and didn't let me shave, I would definitely have a crazy beard. But like Aries, I'm like, he could look like anything he wants. But clearly this Aries has forgotten. But it's really like, they're like, oh, I didn't even recognize him with a beard. But look, they're all like together at the end. So it's nice. That's a little bit of a win for Aries because at least someone loves him, Aphrodite. Megan, thank you very much for sending that in. So recently, Moira has introduced me to the fun that you can have customizing characters in Animal Crossing. She sent me some new things today. Before we get that, she actually sent me a drawing that she calls the 3 stages of Persephone. And way here, wait, am I showing the right corner? No. Way here, we have baby Persephone. There's her mom holding her. Then there's Persephone in the world above. I guess she's Corey here. You could tell it's the world above because there's Helios in his chariot. And then there's her underground. She looks pretty much the same. It's kind of, oh, here are my cats. There you go. It's got to happen. It's she's like a mirror reflection of each other, which is a really interesting take on that. And this last panel, I guess that's the underworld after she's left? Or maybe that's the diamonds? I'm not sure. That's pretty cool. Nice job, Moira. I really like your style. Now this is fun. In Animal Crossing, she made also a Persephone. Look at her Hades. I don't know what's going on with that guy. I love him. I like the fact that Hades hangs out in the underworld. He's got a little purple couch, and he wears like a weird kind of like love ant mask because he's Hades. He's like, yeah, I don't know. Nobody else is around. Who cares what I do? And then she drew, this is her Aphrodite. And at first I thought this was a cat, but now I think it's a squirrel. But, I still approve. I'm like, cats, I love cats, even though cats are bad. And they, currently knocking things over. I suspect today is the day one of my cats is going to make an appearance today. My cats can't leave me alone today, and they're rambunctious. So somebody's probably getting picked up at some point. Let's see what else we have. A few things from Yehi. And this first one is really fun. First off, Yehi's work is always beautiful. Her sense of color is amazing. She also sent it backwards so we could actually read it. Southeast coast of Australia, BC, 4000. Mine? Okay, so you see what she's doing here, right? And you see why she chose Australia. This is a reference to Finding Nemo. I almost said Finding Dory, which takes place off the coast of Australia, off the Great Barrier Reef. And, there's those, hilarious seagulls. And they're, and there's Poseidon with his own golden apple. And they're, going, mine. And then let's go to the next page. And they do what they do in that movie. The mine. And Poseidon goes, mine! And eats it. I love the crazy violence now in this picture. You get this, this also, it's a good character piece on Poseidon. He's looking at the apple, he's like, I don't know what to make of this apple. Why do people fight over apples? Who cares about this apple? But as soon as somebody else shows they want it, he's like, yeah, I'm going to eat it, even though it's clearly metal. And luckily I have, weird shark teeth, but, he's a god, it's not going to hurt him. Here we have, so we talked about Aristophanes, and several of you came in to remind me it was Aristophanes because I was having a brain bubble. His play, The Frogs, which I knew about, but I didn't know about the Sondheim musical, which I read about. It was first, do you guys know it was first performed in a swimming pool at Yale University? You do now. So we were talking about that the other day. So yeah, he also drew a picture. This is an excerpt. This is Dionysus going down to the underworld. I guess this is how you write, ribbit in Korean, which I'm loving the way it looks. And he's just kind of, all dirty and stuff. I know from reading Aristophanes' version that Dionysus is a little fussy in that. And he's not, a super heroic guy. He's kind of ew, dirty. So I guess that's probably carried over here. And finally, just a pretty awesome picture of Athena just pelting Pallas the giant in the back of the head with a mountain. It's like, boom. I'm like, cool. I like that. We know that's one of her standard battle techniques. That's how she decks Ares when they fight in the Trojan War. Just like, so if you're ever going to get in a fight with Athena, don't be near a mountain because she will probably pick it up and hurl it at you. Or maybe that's even like, maybe that's actually not in a mountain. Maybe that's like Sicily, because we know that that's another move of hers. She throws Sicily at people. I don't know. I guess if you're fighting someone who could pick up and throw an entire like island, you're probably, doesn't matter where you're standing, you're going to lose. Oof, boy, we have a bunch of stuff here. This is from the brother-sister team of Nora and Drake. I'm just going to show you, I think it's just going to be all Nora stuff up first. She drew her own version of the Gigantomachy. Look at these cute giants. I like that they're so multicolored. And there's various Olympians just like poking holes in them. And like that one guy, he's got, I think that's Artemis. And that one's got, oh, I wonder if that's Otis and Ephialtes. Because one seems to have Artemis and one seems to have Hera. But then who's that guy? And who's he holding? Is that Aphrodite? Maybe that's like their third brother, like Tophialtes? I don't know. Here's a picture of the Gigantes stacking up mountains. Like I said, that's kind of the coolest visual. Like the fact that it doesn't really appear in written stories until all the way till like we get to like Ovid. I'm like, come on, that's the coolest thing. I like the tusks on those guys too. This is a picture, I really dig this. This is a picture of Medusa before her transformation. Kind of a cool Medusa. Look at the attention paid to her jewelry. I like that she's got like a nose ring. That's just like really cool. Way to go. Here's a kind of, this is a two-piecer. Here's Hephaestus, and he's looking like, oh, wait, I go out, and what's going on? Oh, Aphrodite and Ares. So you turn the page, and then there's them trapped under the net. And then this is funny because, you know, in the original story, both, you know, Hera and Athena are kind of like, we shouldn't really look at that. It's not proper. Here they're just straight up there and just laughing. Like, yeah, haha. And then this is from Drake. This is, Drake has been doing like these kind of space age god stories, which are really cool. You could see, there's Mount Olympus, you can see the pillars and stuff. Pretty sure that's Helios right in the middle of the sun. And then we have various spaceships and such going, because, you know, it makes sense. The gods live forever. Why wouldn't they be into the future where there's spaceships? And speaking of, here's some more. Pretty cool. This almost looks like, right? Like the way, like this doesn't almost look like a transformer. Like it's becoming like into a rocket ship. I don't know. Maybe it is. I like it. Thank you both so much, Nora and Drake. And I think we have maybe time for one more thing. So I'm going to apologize up front. It means a few people aren't going to get their picture shown today. But that's okay because you guys are the best. And, you know, sometimes it happens. I'm sorry for folks who didn't get to show it. But this one, this is super cool. This one is called Dumb Gigantes. So first off, these are great Gigantes. Look at the tusks. Oh, this is from Joseph, by the way. I wanted to mention that. And to prove that they are dumb, they're counting. This one's going, brother, Mother Earth says we need 95 mountains. Because they were adjusting each other's brother, I feel like this is probably Otis and Ephialtes. And then the dumb, I guess this is like the dumber and dumber ones. He's like, okay, and he counts. And he's like, 1, 9, 5, 87. Yeah, so, I mean, they're never going to get to 95 mountains. I wonder why 95 mountains. That's a lot. I think Mother Earth is trying to make them so they never get there. And then, this is from Juliet. And she drew a bunch of portraits. There's Hermes. There's, oh, Aphrodite. I'm like, wait, I thought that was Aphrodite, but I didn't see the name was split. Beautiful. And then finally Zeus. I like that Zeus kind of like, he looks like a lion. He looks a little ferocious, which actually makes a lot of sense. So everybody, thank you so much for writing in. If you have pictures you want to send, please send them to my email at georgeoconnorbooks@gmail.com. Thank you very much if you could do that. Also, if you want to catch old episodes or watch episodes again, I put all the stuff up on my youtube.com/usergeorgeolympians. I'm also going to say, hey, you know what? Maybe like subscribe there because I think I'm going to start putting up stuff that's going to be exclusive for the YouTube because so far on like Instagram, I'm kind of limited just doing here, but I know a lot of people have expressed interest in seeing stuff on sketchbooks and things. And that might be not the best place to hold up like this. I might want to do some actual videos. So if you've never been to my YouTube, I'm gonna lean into this for a few days. So maybe go to my youtube.com/usergeorgeolympians, sign up, and then, you know, get notified when I do start putting up special YouTube only stuff. Whew. So it's hot here, as you guys know. Oh, here's my cat. So today we're gonna talk about Io. And Io is one of those characters that kind of is like the connective tissue for a lot of myths. She literally wanders in and out of a bunch of different stories. And you'll notice that she actually does a fair bit of wandering in and out of my books. And I intended to have her do more. I mentioned up front how I talked about how there was a dropped storyline. Io kind of got cut about midway through her appearances, and I'm going to talk about that as I talk about Io. So Io was a princess of Argo. Her name is allegedly, although I'm no linguist, so I can't actually confirm this, but the name Io was apparently an Argive, which means related to Argos, dialect that means the moon. And there's a lot of connections she has with the moon, and we'll definitely be discussing that as we go. Now, her father was a guy named Inachos. And Inachos was, he was the king of Argos. In many instances, he is the founder of Argos. Like, he's the guy who founded the city there. And what's even more interesting is he is the dude who founded or brought to Argos the worship of Hera. And that's very interesting for many reasons, because if you know what happens to Io, you know that she's very inextricably bound with Hera. It's also interesting because Hera that's one of her principal spots of worship. She was a very major goddess in Argos. And before I get too far into that, I want to just address Inachos a little bit, because he is a king and he's mortal, and I might even be conflating two different people, but I don't think so, because Aeschylus himself says his dad is Oceanus and his mom is Tethys. So he's that would make him, that he has two parents who are Titans. That would make Inachos at least a Titan, perhaps a second generation Titan, sort of like Prometheus, where they're kind of like a god more, like, or they're similar to Olympians. But what does that make? Then we're not really sure who Io's mom is. There's different sources. Does that make her a goddess? She's often referred to as a hero. And it's kind of weird because, like, it seems like Inachos could maybe die. He's a king. You don't really hear too many stories where kings are gods. Except for, like I said, in Aeschylus. I'm going to talk a lot about Aeschylus today. He straight up says his dad is Oceanus. So it's kind of a weird thing. I'm like, that's interesting. So this is what I was saying up front also. Is Io going to be a goddess? Is she a hero? Is she a monster? I mean, it depends on if you have a really loose definition of monsters. Like, cows are monsters! I mean, breakfast must be traumatic for you if you have milk. But, yeah, so just put that on the back burner. We'll talk about that. Now, this is a story that I touch on very briefly. I'm giving you some more backstory still. You see it in Poseidon, where I tell the judgment of Athens. How basically there was going to be a city built where Athens is today, and there was a city, it's still there, it's Athens. But the people who would be the Athenians were trying to determine who would be their patron god. And it's a choice between Poseidon and Athena. And, you know, Poseidon, very famously, he strikes the ground and a fountain comes up. And everyone's like, yay, he made water, but it's like salty. They're like, ew, it's gross. And then Athena gives them the first olive tree. So she wins, and that's why it's called Athens and not Poseidonia, right? And I mentioned briefly in the book, I kind of rattle off a few other places where this happens elsewhere. It's kind of a recurring theme in Greek mythology where there is a major Greek city-state where Poseidon is in contention with another goddess or god in order to be in charge of it. And I mentioned in Rhodes, he's in contention with Helios. In I think it's Dodona, it's with Zeus, but in Argo, it's with Hera. And we know that Inachus, the father of Io, is the guy who judges this. We don't hear the same bit about the contest. We don't know what they did to compete. I don't think it was even a thing of competing. I think Inachus is just a big Hera fan. He's the guy who introduces the worship of Hera to this area. But we do know that Poseidon gets really mad. And depending on your source, sometimes he either floods the Argive area or sometimes he dries it up. Or maybe he does both. Maybe it's at the same, like, you know, sometimes it's feast or famine. Sometimes there's no river at all and then suddenly there's like a torrent of like crazy water. He also has a lot of connections to cows. There's a lot of connections to cows. So Io is the daughter of Inachos, the guy who founds Argo, which is the center of worship, or one of the centers of worship for Hera. Inachos also, in some sources, is a priest of Hera. in some sources, and this is super interesting, Io is a princess of Hera. I mean, a priestess of Hera. So that's kind of like shades of Medusa being a priestess of Athena and being punished by her, right? The root of punishment is very similar. So Zeus takes a fancy to Io. Depending on your version of the story, Io likes him back, or actually in Aeschylus's version, Io's like, no, get away from me. I worship your wife. This is awful. She's going to do terrible things to me. And finally, her dad, Inachos, is like, Zeus really likes you. You better get out of here, and kicks her out. And then, I don't know. Then Zeus turns her. It doesn't work as well as the more familiar version, which is honestly the version I told in my book, Hera. Hera's looking for Zeus and she can't find him, and she knows what that means. When you can't see Zeus, he's probably up to something he shouldn't be, and she goes around Mount Olympus searching for him, and all the gods are like, I don't know. And she goes down, and I've said this before, the eyes of an Olympian see what they need to see. She kind of just knows where she needs to go, and she just walks up to this, wooded spot, and she flings it open, and then there's Zeus having a picnic with a cow. Wasn't a cow a few seconds ago. Zeus had a last-minute warning. Remember, he can tell the future too, just like Prometheus, just like Apollo, which we'll get into later. But maybe not as good. And Hera's like, oh, that's weird, huh? But she knows what's going on. Basically, Zeus and Io were sitting there. They were about to be together when Hera came and interrupted them. He's caught. Zeus knows he can't get away. So he does the only thing he could think of in the moment, and he immediately touches Io and transforms her into a cow. She's a beautiful white heifer, as we learn in description. I'm going to draw her as a cow. So when it came time to design her, I actually spent a lot of time seeing what sort of cows lived back then. Because, you probably know this, maybe you don't think about it too much because it's not something you probably do need to think about too much unless you live on a farm or you're interested in this stuff. There's different breeds of cows. And the types of cows have changed a lot over the years. So I'm like, okay, what sort of cows are there being in ancient Greece? And this is a little bit of a spoiler. I didn't just stop there. Io does a lot of wandering. And I'm also like, what sort of cows were there in ancient Egypt? So I found this one type of breed. It's represented, actually you can see it in Greek art too, but it's represented a lot in art. Has this big kind of like bump on its back, like this weird like fatty sack, almost like a camel or a dromedary or something. It's a big, powerful animal. Big haunches. And it tends to be white, which was also like perfect. It's like we know she's transformed into this, the expression I think is actually glistening white. Like she is a beautiful cow. I mean, maybe not my thing, but, for cows, she's really gorgeous. And because she had been a person, as one of her telltale signs, I give her earrings. I figure you get transformed into a cow if your ears are pierced like mine. Like, that's not going to go away. So that's kind of like a kind of running bit when you see her in the books, that she still has earrings in. And you see when she's transformed, when Zeus transforms her in Hera, she's like literally sitting there with a stunned look on her cow face, and there's like human clothes laying around her that Zeus kind of kicks to the side. Because like he just turned her. Like this happens a second before. I think there's even sparkles. I can't remember if I kept that in or not. And I'll be honest, my little scene that I wrote where Hera is kind of playing dumb, but also showing Zeus she's way smarter than him, is one of the favorite things I've ever written for Olympians. If you ever want to read this section, you don't have my books, go to my website, georgeoconnorbooks.com. In the educator section, there's a section for educators. We've adapted little sections of my books into small plays that you could perform with like your classmates or your friends. And I did a little small version based on this bit because I just thought it was really funny. The idea that Zeus is constantly playing catch up. And Hera's like, so you're having a picnic with a cow? And he's like, yeah, I could totally explain. And he realizes like, I can't explain this. Why on earth would I be having a picnic with a cow? And then he's like, oh, I know. It's a gift for you. And he's like, look how beautiful her eyes are. And this is a reference. Hera is actually referred to one of her none of her cult titles, one of her like epithets. She's referred to as cow-eyed, which sounds very offensive to us. If he says, you got the eyes of a cow, I'd be like, shut up. But like for the ancient Greeks, they meant like big, watery with heavy lashes. Look at her eyes. I mean, she's got pretty eyes for a cow. It's a whole thing. I don't want to just like talk through my stuff. Basically, she outsmarts Zeus. She gets to take the cow, and he's like, "Oh, okay." And he knows he's defeated because, like, why would he like put up a fight? He's like, "Oh no, you can't take the cow." He can't say because the cow was secretly my girlfriend. That would be mad awkward. So she takes the cow, and she knows darn well that this cow isn't always a cow. And she kind of gets in the cow's face, Io's face, and she's like, "Well, what's its name?" And he's like, "Io. Her name is Io." She's like, "It's a perfect name for a perfect cow." And she's not done. She knows her husband Zeus is wily, and he's going to free this woman if he can. So what does she do? She rings up, well, probably not because cell phones hadn't been invented, or phones or anything, but she telepathically, or just summons him, Argus Panoptis, the guy who I kind of shipped as maybe her like side boyfriend or something, maybe just somebody who she disrespects because he's not a creep like Zeus. And she's like, "Argus, you have 100 eyes." He's like, "Yes, this is true." She's like, "You literally never sleep because one of your, like, at least 50 of your eyes are always open." He goes, "This is also true. You're basically the best guardsman who will ever live." He's like, "This is also true." She's like, "Guard this cow." He's like, "Okay." So he just watches over Io. And I guess this kind of like leads to the fact that maybe Io is a goddess because it occurs to me like a lot of time must pass here. And we don't see Io in my books for a bit. And we don't see her again until book 10, Hermes, where we are walking down the path with the storyteller and his dog. And the storyteller is just kind of like at the far ends of the earth, exploring different areas, looking for a place to tell his stories. And he walks by this one inauspicious little house, but he's like, "Hey, dog." And the dog's like, "Brr," because it's a dog. And he's like, "I bet you that house has some money." And the dog's like, "Brr." And he's like, "Because check out the earrings on their cow. If you put earrings on a cow, you got to have some extra money." So he goes up there, he knocks on the door. A giant dude with 100 eyes on his body answers. He's like, "Okay, this is going to be an interesting day." And then they tell stories about Hermes, and the whole time there's this poor cow just tied to a tree, who we know is really the Princess Io. At the end of the book, we learn one of the visitors is actually Hermes. The messenger god, which I hate when people call him that. But here he is really acting as a messenger for his dad, Zeus. He's been sent. Zeus finally found out. Or maybe he knew all along and he just didn't really think about acting on it because he's Zeus. He finally found out what happened to Io. And he's like, "Okay, so I need you to take care of this for me, Hermes." And so Hermes, the whole idea was he was going to tell really boring stories and put Argus to sleep, but the stories weren't very boring, so Argus went to sleep. He puts Argus to sleep, cuts off his head. If you want my theory on why he cut off his head, why Hermes had to kill him, check out my episode on youtube.com/usergeorgeolympians and watch the episode on Echidna. I have a whole theory in there. So, Hermes, with the guardian of the cow, Io, dead, Hermes takes Io and lets her free. Doesn't turn her back into a human, though. Just like, go on your way. You still have a lot more story to tell, and that's a story for another day. And then there's a little epilogue where we see Hera comes down and she sees what's happened. She finds like the headless corpse of Argus. She takes his 100 eyes and puts them on her favorite bird, the peacock. But then she creates a gadfly, which is like a kind of stinging, like really annoying fly, to fly after poor Io and just keep biting her, so she can never rest. Kind of shades of what she did to Leda with Apollo and Artemis's mom, like doesn't let him rest. That's like a favorite technique of Hera, just like, okay, I'll just make your life awful. That's the last we see of Io in my books. But there was this whole sequence that was going to be in Hephaestus that got cut. So if you've read my book Hephaestus, you know, maybe, or maybe you don't, basically the framing device for that book I loosely adapted from Aeschylus's play Prometheus Bound. In Prometheus Bound, the play, the actual ancient classic play, it opens up where Prometheus is being bound to the Caucasus Mountains. He's being bound to a rock by Hephaestus and by the embodiments of strength and force, Kuretos and Ba. And basically, the play is structured where the one character who stays in the place in the same way, because he's literally nailed to a mountain, is Prometheus. And he has various discussions with other characters from Greek mythology who come. First one he talks to is Hephaestus. For obvious reasons, Hephaestus is binding him there. Then Hermes comes, and Hermes kind of interrogates him a little bit. And if you read my book, you'll notice that's exactly what happens. While Hephaestus is still there, and Hermes comes, and that's where we kind of get like the hint that Hermes, like, Hermes, the real reason Prometheus is being bound is not because he stole fire. It's because Prometheus has that ability to tell the future. And Prometheus has hinted that he knows how Zeus will be overthrown. And we know Zeus really wants to make sure he never gets overthrown. So he's interrogating him. Now, if you read Prometheus Bound, the play, there's another visitor. Well, there's actually two more visitors. Kind of. There's the Oceanides who visit and kind of form a Greek chorus. The Oceanides are the daughters of Oceanus. Oh, just like Inachus, right? And they kind of like stick around, but like they do talk a bit. Like there's a whole connection there. I was going to have Thetis be the inspiration of that, and you actually do have a section of her in the book, but end up making her not actually meet Prometheus. It just seemed too weird. Why would she be in the mountains in Russia? Or in Caucasus, not necessarily Russia. And then there was going to be a certain cow, Io. Because Io actually comes and talks to Prometheus. And it's a kind of cool part of the play, and it's really where we get the best account of the story of Io, where it tells the whole story of how she was transformed by Zeus into this cow, and she's been wandering, and like she was held prisoner for years, and then like was freed by Hermes, but didn't turn to a human, and then she's been bit by this fly and has been wandering around everywhere. And this fly is so merciless that she doesn't really get a chance to eat. Again, this is probably evidence she's a goddess, because she doesn't seem to starve or anything. But she's never able to rest or eat and just keeps walking on and on and on. And she comes here, and they have a conversation, her and Prometheus. And the reason it got cut, A, it was pretty hard to figure out how a cow would get up a mountain. B, the conversation that they have in the book, in Prometheus Bound, Prometheus uses his ability to tell the future. He kind of fills in Io about what the rest of her life is going to be. And it's rough. It's just him being like, yeah, so you're going to go, after here, you should probably go to Themyscira, which is the land of the Amazons. Hey, like Wonder Woman. And you should go there, and the Amazons will help you. They'll take you to Cimmeria. Hey, Cimmeria is where Conan's from. I just think those are both cool that they've lived on in other forms. And eventually, from there, you're going to cross over into Asia, the entire continent of Asia. And she's like, what? Oh my gosh. And then you're going to travel, and he he tells all these travels, and like he's like, it's going to be hard. And she's just the whole time, I was like, oh my gosh, why? This is so awful. Why is this happening to me? And he says like, look, you're going to cross the sea. It's going to become the Ionian Sea after you. You're eventually going to get to Egypt. When you're in Egypt, you're eventually going to turn back to human. It's going to take a long, long time. But the good news is you do become a human, and you will eventually, one of your ancestors will be the greatest hero of all time. He's talking about Heracles. So Io, she eventually does. So she goes to all these other trips. Where else? I mean, just all kinds of weird places. It's literally... And Aeschylus spells out a lot of it. And if you look on a map, it's crazy where she goes. Like, you would think like it would be like dot, dot, dot. It's like bop, 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 bop. She's all over the world. And she goes to places that don't really necessarily exist, mythological places. She travels forever. And then when she finally gets to Egypt, she is finally Zeus. Because I guess Egypt is far enough away that Hera's like, oh, I don't care anymore. And we know maybe Egypt is like hidden in a way. Because we know that's where the gods fled when they were fleeing from Typhon, right? So maybe there's a little bit of a protection there. She finally gets to Egypt. Zeus finally turns her back. First thing that happens, which is like just messed up, turns out she'd been pregnant this whole time. Oh, shades of Medusa again, right? I guess when you like get transformed and you're pregnant, like you just don't get a baby. She gives birth to this guy, Epaphus, who is the son of Zeus. What's very interesting about Epaphus is Epaphus's name means at a touch. She actually really never was with Zeus. He just touched her, but by touching her, just by his hand, he made her pregnant, which is like, wow, that's just weird. And Epaphus becomes the king of Ethiopia, which we've mentioned here a bit. Epaphus's ancestors end up being Andromeda. So she like has this huge, so her sons with like not just Epaphras, she has other kids. I forget her. She marries a king of Egypt, like Telegemon or something. No, that's not it. It's Telamon. She has the children that become the Ionian ancestors, which becomes Perseus, which becomes Heracles, all that. Like that entire tribe of the ancient Greek world was divided into like 4 quote unquote tribes. There was like the Ionians, the Dorians, the Achaeans, who I've mentioned before. That's like actually what they use the term in the Iliad, and the Aeolians. She's like the progenitor of an entire like group of the ancient Greek speaking world. And if you ever heard the term Ionian, you maybe have heard it. I mean, there is the sea. There's also there is a type of. Have you ever noticed that like pillars in ancient Greece have different types? There's a top that looks like this, where there's kind of like these 2 balls. And then like there's the ribs coming down and stuff. That's an Ionian capital. And that's like from the people that she is the progenitor of. They all come from that. So I don't know. Does she feel good about that? She gets to create this, like, it's like, hey, your ancestors will be awesome, but you're going to spend what I figure has to be at least several decades as a cow, walking around, being stung by a fly. Before that, you're going to be, just tied up to a tree. It's kind of a rough story for Io. What else did I want to mention? Was there anything else? Oh, I kind of wanted to just share a little something. This is kind of like vaguely remembered. But because I did intend to have this scene where she was going to be in Hephaestus, and it was going to kind of be, there's certain plot lines I've threaded throughout the entire Olympian series. There's the most major one is the ongoing attempts by Mother Earth to overthrow Zeus, and the different attempts he rebuffs about that. That's kind of an ongoing plot line, right? You'll see a lot of other little things, and one of these ones was going to be Io, and there was going to be a scene, probably at the end of Dionysus, just like a little one-page thing, where we're going to see her just be reborn, like finally turn back to a human. And that was one of the problems. I never knew where I was going to put that last scene in. And because it just didn't work, I had too much stuff to stick in Hephaestus. She just got bumped. We kind of never get to hear her full story. I think I even literally did the "That's a Tale for Another Day" bit, and like I don't think it's going to end up in any of my books. Maybe I'll do it in one of the later books when I return to this. It'd be a fun thing just to kind of explore that. Maybe I'll do like a little side comic. But yeah, we meet her in Hera. She pops up again in Hermes. She was meant to be in Hephaestus, and then she was probably going to appear one more time in Dionysus. And she really has no connection to Dionysus, so it didn't work. She does have a connection to the moon. I mentioned that, like that they apparently the name Io means moon, and the weird travel she made across the sky, like the land, was somehow maybe it was actually the way it was somehow representatively the moon travels across the sky. I mean, the moon's pretty consistent to me, so I don't know why it's all these different places. But I just want to throw this out. It's interesting that she is a cow, and she's related to the moon, because if you watch the episode we did on Selene, who is the moon. In some versions, she rides across on a horse, but in some versions, she rides across the sky on an ox, on a cow. And I even draw my Selene with giant horns like a cow. So there's this definite idea that exists where there's this connection between the moon and cattle in ancient Greece. Additionally, there's that interesting connection between Hera and cows. She is cow-eyed. And then you have like this, her priestess is turned into a cow. And Io is one of the symbols of Hera, even though Hera is her main persecutor. And when Io goes to Egypt, she's actually conflated by a lot of people later with Isis, who I don't normally think of as cow-headed, but apparently there's some evidence that at points she was cow-headed. So there's this whole interesting like theme of cows going on. Because Io ended up in Egypt and is the, many Egyptians are descended from her. The Ionians are all descended from her. Many Ethiopians are. When I actually designed her when she was going to appear, I actually gave her, because we never actually see her as a human in Hera. So I wanted to give her kind of an appearance like what we would see in an Egyptian. And that she had the kind of like the exaggerated eye makeup. She had a dark complexion, a strong nose. And I gave her just kind of a generic haircut. Something that was evocative of what you might see on an Egyptian without it being an Egyptian, because she's not actually Egyptian, so to speak. Although I guess she looks very Egyptian. I think I was kind of playing with the idea that maybe she had like a Minoan appearance, because there's a lot of evidence that they maybe look similar. But that would be what my Io looks like when she's not. And probably I would give her like some sort of like little like headpiece that looks like cow horns. So there. That is my story of Io. Let me look at my notes. I think I got everything here. My notes were pretty sloppy this time. Yeah. So I think that's it. So, thank you. Wait, somebody wrote burger. Are you guys discussing eating Io? You sickos. So, thank you very much for tuning into this episode. This is normally when I throw it open for some questions, if anybody has them. Do we have anything? It looks like there were some really weird sign conversations here. Sparks fly. Io means moon. Selene. What? Yeah, it's very specifically in this one dialect. And it was one specific Argive dialect. And in Argos, she definitely is associated with the moon. And maybe... So it's... Here's the thing that probably happened. I talk about this a lot, how different gods and goddesses, like the way you see Artemis kind of in late antiquity, like switches over to being like the goddess of the moon. She kind of supplants Selene. And so that happens a lot, where you maybe start off having multiple goddesses. She was probably, for this small group of people, a relatively small group of people in the Argive region, she was probably their moon goddess. And as the Greek world spread and started more having interaction with each other, and the Olympian pantheon was solidifying, she got kind of relegated to kind of weird status. Selene was definitely the moon at that point. And even then, she was kind of operating underneath Artemis. So you had this kind of extraneous goddess. Like, you're like, well, what do you do with her? And that's like that also ties in the thing I'm saying up front, where like, I mean, is she a goddess or is she a hero? She's, her grandpa is a Titan. Her dad is the son of Titans. Anywhere else in the ancient mythological world, that would make her at the very least a demigod, but there's very little evidence to show that she has any demigod abilities. There's really not much of a mention of Inachus, her father, having any... there's one bit in Aeschylus where they mention different river gods getting together. That's actually, I think, the part where they specifically confirm he's the son of Oceanus. But he doesn't show up because he's sad about what happened to his daughter. And so, but he's also like a mortal king sort of thing. It's weird. It's definitely a thing that wasn't fully not figured out. Like, I do think she was avenged. She was first the moon, and this language was a little different. And then like, oh, but Selene's the moon. So she kind of got bumped down to being like a cow. Who travels on, who still plays a huge role. I mean, goodness, like, she goes to Egypt and she follows this entire line of like... Oh, that just reminded me. There's a little bit of a chronological error in my books, which I need to point out. So, obviously, this means, if you think about it, if she is the ancestor of Perseus, this story has to take place very far in the past, right? So, because Perseus, of course, is the grandfather of Heracles, and Heracles happens before the Trojan War. So, in flashback, like, I had to be very careful whenever there's a story dealing with her to not show anything that didn't really work out chronologically. And I noticed a mistake, and I'm so sad about it. If you look carefully, this is so nerdy, but I think you all appreciate it. There is one panel in Hermes, when we have baby Hermes. Baby Hermes, of course, is older than Dionysus. Dionysus was a mortal at the same time as Heracles, which places him after. When baby Hermes goes up to Mount Olympus and he meets all the gods for the first time, I was very careful not to draw this, but in one panel, there's a snake popping up right next to Athena. Now, the snake, we've talked about this a lot recently, the snakes on Athena's aegis come from the head of Medusa. Medusa's head is cut off by Perseus, who is an ancestor of her, right? And she wouldn't be freed until after Hermes was an adult. It just doesn't work. That snake shouldn't be there. So it's just one little panel, and like I was so used to drawing Athena, I forgot. Because sometimes you'll notice, depending what time frame this happens in, sometimes I draw the gods, like Athena's got a different aegis on there, because she hasn't yet, maybe she's killed Pallas, but she hasn't yet encountered Medusa. And she shouldn't have that snake there. So here's my theory. Are you working for this? Are you ready for this? Marvel Comics used to do this thing. When you would catch a continuity mistake, you would write in and explain a reason why that mistake wasn't actually a mistake. You're like somebody like, how come Doctor Doom's head was brown here? You're like, you would write in and be like, well, the reason it was brown was actually what we didn't see was the panel before he slipped and fell into mud. And if they liked it, they'd be like, okay, and they send you a no prize. And the no prize was just an empty envelope that said, hey, you want a no prize? I guess they're pretty collectible now. So my no prize idea for this is why there's that snake in that one panel. Athena was just that day thinking how nice it would be if her Aegis had kind of snake tassels, and she's a shape changer, right? So she turned her hand into a snake and was just kind of making it hang out there. She's like, what do you think? Does this look good? Does this look good? How's that work for no prize? If you have a better no prize, write to me. I mean, it's super duper minor. And honestly, I don't think any of you guys would have noticed if I hadn't said it. But maybe you would. You guys really are, on your myths. So let's see what else we got. The cow goes over the moon. Oh, wait. Oh my God. Wait, bubblegum. Bubbles gum. That's connection, right? Like, I wonder, okay, how old is that? Sometimes these really old nursery rhymes are much older than we know. Like, what if that does have roots going back that far? Like this connection between the cow and the moon? And how about the cow being made of cheese? Is that a connection? The cow. The moon being made of cheese. Is that a thing too? This is very interesting. Let's see. I was beautiful. How was the specific 66 pages settled down? And why do you think Dionysus is the god of wine, but also the god of theater? Okay, so the specific 66 pages, what Yehi is mentioning here is if you look carefully at Olympians, there are 66 pages of comics, and then there's like another additional 12 pages of back material and stuff. And what Yehi has wisely cued into here, it's really hard to limit these books to 66 pages. It's the hardest thing about writing Olympians is having to cut stuff. And if you've listened to these, I talk about there's a lot of things I have to cut. And it's kind of making stuff work. And it really, way back when I first started working on this, I made a big spreadsheet of like what the 12 books would be, and then across what the different myths would be. And then there was myths that wove through, like Io, stories that would appear in different books and things. And I kind of had to just rank those because sometimes there were things I had to cut. I've mentioned before, Eros and Psyche got cut from Aphrodite, and Orpheus and Eurydice got cut from Hades. And then there's other stuff like Daedalus and Icarus was actually there was a little bit more about them in Poseidon. That got cut too. So it comes down to, I would have this list of all the stories I wanted to tell. And then I'd have to look at that list and be like, which stories are really necessary to understanding the goddess or god this book is about? And then I'd have to cut from there. And even then, there's stuff I have to cut further. So a lot of times I'll work out the front of the book. I'll make a grid. It'll be literally like 66 pages, like little pages. And I'll actually show you guys that sometime because I have some laying around here. I don't want to run off and get them. You can see it for Dionysus. I'll actually mark off pages. I'm like, okay, I think I need like 14 pages to tell the story of Semele, who's Dionysus' mom. So I do 14 pages of that. It's actually more. And then I'm like, but I would need these many pages. I kind of block off stuff, figure out how much space I would have. And then I start laying out the book. And I know if I'm going too long, I have to rework my whole idea. And then there's stuff from Dionysus that just got cut. Just like, it's always happening. It's a lot of editing. A lot of editing. Now, as response to the other question, why do I think the god of wine is also the god of theater? Partially because it became, the theater was used as a way to worship him. But if you think about it as the god of wine, he's also the god of madness, right? He's the god of losing your inhibitions. He's the god of breaking societal norms. And theater, especially in ancient Greece, was often used to ridicule those in charge. So he embodies all that stuff. To be an actor, you have to be not afraid just to cut loose and literally lose your identity, so to speak. I mean, hopefully you don't really. But in another character's persona. And that really makes a lot of sense for Dionysus. Are we going to see what happens to Cadmus and Harmony being cursed by Hephaestus in Dionysus? Wait, did I? Oh, wait, I misread that for a second. I'm like, wait, I didn't show that, right? I actually really haven't hit on Cadmus yet at all in my stories. Kind of because there is a version where he plays a pretty key role in Typhon, and I used a different version where Hermes plays that role because it just made more sense chronologically. There's not going to be any mention of Cadmus and Harmony in Dionysus. If anything, if Cadmus and Harmony ever do make an appearance, it would probably be in one of the side Greek stories that I would tell after I do Asgardians. because it's kind of hard. That's the case. Even though, like, there's some pretty strong Olympian connections there. Like, Harmony's mom is Aphrodite. It doesn't have the sort of story that really defines a god or goddess. And those are always the stories that get cut first. So, like, they just kind of... Cadmus is a great culture hero. Harmony's got some great stories, too, and together. But, like, they don't have an Olympian connection that's strong enough to make them get into any of these books. Could you draw Io as a woman before Zeus turns into a cow? Oh, I did. So I guess, wow, I really had to go back far for questions. Why were the gods so scared of Typhon? Zeus alone was almost able to destroy him on the first try. With all the gods working together, defeating Typhon would be a piece of ambrosia cake. Nicely written. It's a good question. And I talk about this often, like, really, I mean, why are they so scared? Typhon's big, but we've mentioned, like, these dudes the gods can also get really big. They can change shape. They're super duper powerful. Like, Athena picked up Sicily and threw it. I mean, come on. Like, how many billions of tons does that weigh? I think... So... Typhon is ultimately defeated by a combination of Hermes' speed, Zeus's power, and the panic induced by Pan, right? I feel like maybe Typhon, it's maybe reasonable to assume, with his 100 different heads, all speaking different languages, maybe he's so nightmarish in appearance, just this big, and the way I drew him, a big roiling black cloud full of just every creature imaginable and unimaginable, like things you've never even thought of. Maybe it's just he fills them with an unreasonable terror. Or maybe they just, I don't know. I don't know. That's my guess, I guess, because it doesn't make a lot of sense. They're gods. They should be able to do it. I think it was just good for this story. But I'm going to say, I think that Typhon fills them with something akin to panic. Maybe that's why Pan was so effective against Typhon, because often the thing you're good at yourself is actually your own weakness too. So let's assume that it was just like Typhon can incite terror in the same way that Pan can fight panic. So the gods kind of were like, ooh, they wigged out. They went to Egypt, and then as I kind of tried to establish in dialogue between Pan and Hermes, they kind of disconnect from their personalities when they're there. They're in hiding, and they become the Egyptian gods, who are much less personified, and they kind of become almost more abstract. I hope that answers. Could the oxen horn image for lunar deities be related to the crescent moon as it waxed and waned? I mean, I think it's almost certainly. That's from Praetor in 1983. I think it... Oh, happy birthday, by the way. I think it almost definitely is. You can actually see, you go to places like Kriti, and there was they had the ox and the bullhorn symbols, and that seems to be a pretty clear connection that they would have made that. I could be wrong, but to me that just stands to reason. Yeah, he writes, human Io is actually my type. Ahem. I like the little cough. People really think she's pretty. I should have done more with her, huh? If one day Hades could go out from the underworld, could he get sunburn? Okay, interesting question. I don't know enough of the mechanics of sunburn, how that actually works, right? I don't know. So, because I've talked before, the gods don't really have human forms. They adopt human forms. So I assume that, they don't, say, sweat. They don't have sweat glands and stuff. I don't know what the mechanics is, basically, when you get a sunburn. Is it related to melanin, the skin pigmentation? Probably not. It's probably just your skin actually being scorched, right? So I guess the question is, do you think Olympian skin is really skin? Or do you think they're just compressing or modifying the energy that makes up an Olympian body into something that approximates the look of skin? Even if he does, I think he would just be able to be and heal himself in a second afterwards if he started noticing. He's if someone's Hades, normally you're kind of an ashen gray, but now you look like you're super pink. And he's like, huh, that's weird. And he touches it and does that thing where your skin gets pale and it hurts. He's like, oh, let me fix that. So I don't know. That's a good question. Maybe someone should do a comic about it. Is there any other myth of Hermes which paints him in a bad light, seeing as he killed Argus in the myth of Io, but he's normally portrayed as being helpful? Yeah, there's actually, I would say he's definitely regarded as one of the more kindly gods, and one of the gods who's less likely to be kind of manipulative, but you could definitely find, I've said this before, his opening act, when he's a baby, he's born, he's already the smartest god, and he's smart enough to know that if I don't let anybody know how smart I am, I can get up to some trouble, right? And his first act, he steps outside his house, he meets a turtle, and he kills it. So I've always thought that was really fascinating. Like not that killing a turtle is a great sin compared to like killing Argus. He's like a human. It was just a tortoise. But it's still a pretty dark beginning for who is basically a pretty benevolent and happy god. Now, some of that might be tied into the fact that he is the psychopomp, that he brings the dead to the underworld, right? But then some of that might be just I think he's got a dark side. It's not uncommon for very smart people to kind of sometimes lose sight of like the nicer little things in the world. Like, maybe should be so interested in learning something that they don't really see what they're doing. And I feel like that's kind of what Hermes did there. He's like a little baby who's like super duper smart. That's literally the first living thing reasonably he's ever seen besides his mom. And he's like, well, I want to see what it looks like on the inside. And he kills it, you know? There's some other stories. What is it? The story of, it's an Ovid. I'm going to have to look that one up. There's another story where he like turns a person into stone. Like he's better than most of the gods, but you still would have to watch out for him. When is Dionysus coming out? Not sure. Still drawing it. So probably 2021. Let's see. What about a Demeter book? There's more myths about her than the Elysian mysteries. So the Demeter book, this is from Phoebus Apollo. I've said this before, like the book series is called Olympians, and I wanted to do a book about each of the Olympians. And the book Hades is really meant to be Demeter's book. So she definitely has other stories other than the abduction, but a lot of those stories, it's kind of the thing where a lot of the stories end up being echoes of other stories you've heard. Like there's like the story where she brings agriculture to the humans. There's actually, it's in some ways, it's very similar to the story of Dionysus bringing wine to the humans. And since I knew that was going to be the basis of the Dionysus book, I was like, well, I don't really want to tell that one. I would love to do more with Demeter because she's actually one of my favorite characters to draw. She's really fun. I like that she affects one of the most genteel appearances of the goddesses, but she goes crazy. Like, you don't want to mess with her. She's terrifying. So I would probably love to do more stories with her. When I return to Greek mythology after doing Asgardians, I would not be surprised if you get to see an exploration of some of the more of a more Demeter-centric myth. Can I do an Orion episode? Megan, that's a great idea. Yeah, I think I will. I don't know when, because I had a different idea for Monday, but maybe Monday. But Orion makes so much sense to do him. And I think I was even setting up to do Orion, then I forgot about it. What's your name? Does that mean the Gigantes are the brothers of Aphrodite? Not really. Aphrodite, similar though, right? Aphrodite's, they're both made from like blood spilling out of Uranos. But Aphrodite is more the eros that's spilled out of the seat of love, the seat of the power, so to speak, inside of Uranos. That is interesting, though. I never really thought of that. There's a real kinship there, isn't there? Huh. After the Dionysus book comes out, will there be another box set with books Aries to Dionysus? Most likely. We're also thinking of maybe doing a box set of like all 12, but I know some people are going to really want to have just those, the 7 through 12. I would actually recommend, please write a letter to my publisher for a second. You could find them, or to write them just like texts or something. You could find them on all the social media platforms, but say like, hey, excited about the last Olympians book coming out soon. I just want to say, as somebody who has the box set of the first 6, please make a box set for the second 6. I wouldn't hurt. That's honestly the sort of stuff like publishers figure if you write them something like that, you probably represent a lot more people who think that way. And if you took the time to say something like that, it means a lot to them. Let's see what else we got. I just realized we have a minute left, so I should actually probably wrap this up. So everybody, thank you again. This has been another fun week for me of doing Geek Speaks Greek. Next week, probably Orion. Let's just say it. Let's just say Monday, I'm going to do Orion. And I'm going to bump what I had originally from Monday to Wednesday. So, So meet me back here Monday at 3 p.m. We're going to do Orion. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.